What's up, YouTube? It's been a while since I actually made a video, and man, it is not a great day to be a PoE video maker or content creator because it's just a bunch of negativity. All I see on Reddit is a bunch of people being super angry about the Balance Manifesto. So how we're going to approach the video today, we're going to go over the changes in the Balance Manifesto for people who haven't seen it, and then I'm going to give my input on it and what I think will be the best builds after this Balance Manifesto. So if you can't already tell, the Balance Manifesto was kind of a unmitigated disaster. It has really put a lot of pressure on the patch notes and the announcement live stream to come out with a lot of new skills and a lot of potential reworks of certain ascendancies that will change the game and actually make the meta better. If you want a TLDR about the Balance Manifesto, it is that the same exact skills are still powerful. Some of them have been removed so that they're no longer so powerful, but the meta is identical. The players are weaker overall, and there are less skills to actually choose from in terms of a meta viability standpoint. So let's get straight into it and see what exactly are the skills and what is actually being nerfed and why there's so much doom and gloom happening in Rayclast. So first off, you'll see with the Balance Manifesto that it's kind of a weird format where they always say problem and solution. I'm not really a huge fan of this personally because it makes it seem like you're creating problems out of thin air and your solutions aren't really solving anything. The first off, you can see here, defense problem is that there's not enough diversity for defensive options. So basically they're acknowledging everyone's running Grace, Defiance, Banner, and Determination. So their answer to this is they want to provide more defensive options, which sounds really good on paper. So they nerf spell suppression on gear, and then they increase spell suppression on passive skills. So they want to make it so the right side of the tree have a lot easier access to spell suppression, while the left side will struggle super hard because the values of spell suppression on gear are nerfed drastically. Then they buffed Arctic Armor and Flesh and Stone. So Arctic Armor gives more damage reduction when you're standing still, and Flesh and Stone makes it so enemies outside of your blind range will do even less damage, from like 10 to 20%. The big nerf is Defiance Banner is roughly half power now. It will grant you 24% armor and evasion instead of 49%. Wind Dancer and Arrow Dancing have actually been buffed. I think Wind Dancer now grants you 10% more chance to evade instead of more evasion chance. So that means at the high end, you will be a lot easier to cap out at 90% evasion. Arrow Dancing is also a lot better in that they made it so the downside is not as bad. So let's go actually see what happened. Now, change Arrow Dancing to provide a less extreme penalty. So before, you would have 20% less chance to evade melee attacks, and now it is 25% less evasion rating against melee attacks. So both Arrow Dancing and Wind Dancer are a lot better, but I definitely do not think that any of those changes will make it like game breaking. And I do think that Wind Dancer is probably still kind of bad in the sense that you're taking 20% more melee damage or attack damage if you've been hit recently, which is really bad. Now, Grasping Mail, this is a really bad change in my opinion. They nerfed it from 100% to 50% global defenses. Little do they know that Grasping Mail mod is really not that big of a problem without recombinators and moving it over to an OP base like Ball Regalia. Now, Gravicious mod is something that is probably kind of a little overtuned, but instead of just nerfing the mod, they decided to remove it completely. So Gravicious mod is something that gives you life as extra ES. So if you don't have any energy shield on your gear, you can put a mod on your chest that gives you 10% up to like, I think 10% of your life as extra energy shield. And this allows you to use Aegis Aurora. It allows you to use Ghost Shroud. So it's a really, really powerful mod. But they've decided to replace it with Fizz taken as Fire and Lightning instead. And for defense balances, they decided to buff Blind Effect. They buff Mind Over Matter, which actually does absolutely nothing because they still haven't buffed Mana Regen to compensate for it. And lastly, they buff Fortification. Now, the Fortification change is actually pretty cool because it makes it so that you can get longer Fortify, and it's at 6 seconds now base, and they actually made it so the entry passive nodes will grant duration instead of increased fortification, which means that on Berserker Lightning Strike, for instance, you can probably get a 10-second fortify, which should be a big benefit. So overall, these defense balances really change nothing besides nerfing players a little bit in terms of Defiance banner. But overall, with these changes, everyone is still going to be running Grace, Determination, and maybe the Defiance banner. And everyone's still going to want 100% spell suppression. It's just going to be harder to get now. So there's no new defensive options that's going to jump out at me and make me take it. So overall, defense balance, complete disaster in my opinion. So next up, we move to probably what a lot of people are upset about, and it is Minion Balance. Now, I don't really know that much about Minion builds, but basically, I can summarize the problem as GGG has stated, is that there's not enough ways for players to invest into minions on gear, and some minion skills are clear outliers and that they're too strong. So what this means is that GGG believes that you can't really get more minion damage. You can't really invest a lot into your gear and have your minions do a lot more damage. Now, a lot of these changes to minions, it's hard to say exactly how it's going to play out because we don't really know exactly what mods will be on the new items and exactly what's going to happen with that. But basically, they've nerfed minions across the board because they want to compensate with it by having you roll the damage on the gear or roll mods on gear. Now, this is always going to be a bad change because a lot of minion builds are kind of like league starters. People play minion builds early on because they're super strong, and a lot of minion players are budget players in that they're not trying to invest everything possible into their builds. So minions are just going to be weaker at the start. A lot of the most popular minion builds like Skelly Mages have been completely nerfed to the ground, I think. And they did buff some of the lesser performing minion skills like Summon Raging Spirits and Summon Holy Relic have actually gotten a huge buff. Now, this is actually one of the, so you can see here, they have to actually change a lot of different skills. It will be interesting to see how it plays out. But basically, they've removed a lot of power from minions in general, baseline, and moved it all to gear. So you can see here, you're now able to corrupt +2 level socketed minion gems as a corrupt implicit modifier on helmet, body armor, gloves, and helmets. But they make it so helmets can't roll +1 to +3 level socketed minion gems, and now it's +1 to +2. And then they also added a vendor recipe for +1 minion gems, so it's kind of hard to say exactly how these changes will play out. They also have new items that will now be able to roll minion mods, so like Convoking Wand now has a shield equivalent, and now there's a ring equivalent, and there's also new lower level wands that act like Convoking Wands, so level 20 and 50, so that should make it a little bit better to level with minions in the beginning. And then there's just a bunch of changes. Now, this change is actually pretty big. So how it works currently is that minions actually get charges, like Endurance, Frenzy, and Power charges, but they actually do something different than what they do for players, in that they're actually super OP. But now they're making it so that the Endurance, Frenzy, and Power charges do the same thing as it does for players, which is a massive nerf, supposedly. And they also make it so that minions no longer have penalties for bleed, ignite, and poison. So potentially, minions cannot deal approximately twice as much poison damage, 3 times as much ignite damage, and 7 times as much bleed damage. So it could be pretty crazy depending on what happens. You could potentially play like poison animated weapons or something like that. Now, this change is kind of weird. They make it so that you can have crit more on minions. I'm not really sure how that's going to play out. So maybe someone can make a crit minion build now. Now, this is the change that a lot of people are upset with. So this change is really weird. They're saying that Necromancer is too strong for minion builds, so that this one node right here, Necromancer +2 to minion skill gems, will no longer grant +2, and it will grant Unholy Might. Now, little does GGG know, there is a minion mastery right here that makes it so that you don't even need it, and it gives you Unholy Might. You can see right here. I don't know where it is, but there is a minion mastery or some sort of mastery that gives it so that you can get Unholy Might, and this is a huge slap into the face of all necromancers around the world. Now, this is a pretty weird change because Saboteur is head and shoulders above for traps and mines. I don't see them nerfing Saboteur because everyone is playing Saboteur for traps and mines. So saying that people are playing Necromancer for minions and saying that's a problem. And then the solution is to nerf Necromancer is a completely crazy change to me personally. But overall, I do think minions are kind of hard to tell where they're at, and we'll have to see what exactly the item mods are and how everything will play out. Now, next up, we have skill balance, and here's probably one of the better parts of the Balance Manifesto, where they nerfed a lot of things that should have been nerfed. The Aura Champion and Colossus for Detonate Dead, so no longer Detonate Dead will have 60% more damage. And now we have nerfed the Corpse Life on Tree and Ascendancy, so Necromancer Corpse Pack will no longer give you more Corpse Life. And this actually makes you have to level up Detonate Dead now, so you can't just cheese it by having a level 1 Detonate Dead and having a low mana cost. So mana is going to be an issue if you're still wanting to play Detonate Dead, but you're probably not going to want to play Detonate Dead anymore because I think it got like a 50 to 60% damage nerf. Nerf to Fire Trap's base fire damage per second. I think this was around like a 25-30% nerf. Now this is a big deal because this means that Righteous Fire builds will lose a big chunk of their damage for single target along with the Gravicious Craft. Now this is probably one of the most crazy changes if it's all that's going to happen for Seismic Trap. So basically they're saying that traps for cooldown based traps are too powerful, so they're going to nerf the duration and trap cooldown. Now all this means is that Seismic Trap will have 29% skill duration removed, and it will have 30% increased cooldown recovery rate removed. So this node right here on the tree, 30% increased cooldown recovery rate will no longer exist, and it will just be skills which throw traps have +1. So that change right there is nowhere near large enough to nerf Seismic Trap. So I don't know what they're doing. So I hope they're actually having more changes to Seismic Trap in the manifesto or in the patch notes. And they also nerfed explosive arrow ailment damage, and they separated the fuses to grant something different for ailment and hit. So I think hit is 6% more damage per fuse, and ailment is 3% more damage per fuse. So it's supposed to be like a 20 or 40% damage nerf, not really sure. And they also nerfed the cast when damage taken support gem, which should hurt ward loop builds a lot. And I think this is around a 30+% damage nerf at the top end. Cast on Death Discharge has pretty much been removed from the game. The anomalous alt quality no longer guarantees that you can crit. And that should pretty much kill the skill, because if you can't crit, then you can't actually, kill the boss. And it also had its damage multiplier go from 304% to 152%. So Cast on Death Discharge is pretty much dead. Now, this right here is probably one of the biggest changes in the Balance Manifesto, and that is the removal of Divine Blessing of Life Tap. So pretty much every single build in the game, or most builds in the game, will lose a complete aura, a 50% aura, because you can't link Malevolence to Divine Blessing or Anger to Divine Blessing. Now, there are workarounds to this. You can use Vol Clarity and then use the Divine Blessing aura, but it just leads to a lot more micromanagement. You can also turn off your aura, press Divine Blessing, and turn on the aura again, but that's at 2 extra button presses, which will probably no one will be doing. Now, there's also a nerf to Hydra Spear and Sniper's Mark. These are pretty inconsequential nerfs. Sniper's Mark no longer grants life and mana flash charges when you hit the enemy every 0.5 seconds. And Hydra Spear can no longer be triggered multiple times by minions. You can see down here are all the pictures of the dead skills. Now, next up we have the skill buffs, and I don't really need to say much about this section. This section is pretty much a slap in the face. Now, this is the stuff that makes me really wonder what GGG are doing, because if you just omitted this section, it would probably be a lot better. Like, just look at one of these buffs that they have laid out. Cleave now has +0 to radius at gem level 1, up to +10 to radius at gem level 20, previously +8. I tried playing Cleave yesterday, and let me tell you, these changes are nowhere near enough, and it's a disaster. And the same thing with Crackly Lance, supposedly increasing the beam width by 2, will suddenly make people play a mechanically bad skill, and this is just absolutely atrocious. Now, for Ascendancy balance, Trickster will be reworked and revealed at the 3.19 live stream, so expect to see Trickster fully buffed. And Juggernaut also gets kind of buffed by receiving a mini Transcendence, and it's also nerfed in a weird way. If you look at this Juggernaut notable over here, Unbreakable, they pretty much said the node was too confusing as a problem. So their solution is to break this node down into 2 components, and one of the components is a Transcendence component, which is pretty strong, but you're also splitting the node into 2 nodes, so it's probably kind of a nerf too. Chieftain also gets a slam buff, so this one node right here that no one ever uses. Hoa's Force Strength now grants you 100% to slam damage instead of 50%. So maybe Tectonic Slam Chieftain can be buffed. Now, Pathfinder actually has an interesting change, and it's kind of a buff and a nerf, so it kind of cancels out. So this one node right here has been pretty useless. 20% chance to freeze, shock, and ignite during any flasking effect has been removed. And now it's 20% increased effect of magic utility flash, which sounds pretty good. But in order to compensate for that, they remove 6% reduced elemental damage taken from Nature's Boon. So it's not really a full buff, it's a nerf at the same time. And you'll see later on that Pathfinder has actually been drastically nerfed later on. And that will be very, very apparent. Now, so next up we have unique item balance, and this is kind of sad and kind of expected at the same time. So Melting at the Flesh has been nerfed. And the way they did the nerf was that they made it so you have to make up -4 to -6% all maximum elemental resistances. So you have to divine the Melting of the Flesh now. And this also means that you will need 94% max res to get 90% max res now. And this is not too bad to make up. It makes it so that you probably have to use Imbalance Guard of Impossible Escape so you can get these nodes down here. So that jewel will probably be very, very expensive. But in reality, it's not really going to change a whole lot. People are still going to be taking Melting of the Flesh, even with 89%, 88% max res. It's still incredibly powerful. Now, the next up, we have Crystallized Omniscience. Now, the problem was that Crystallized Omniscience was too powerful and that there was no other choices for amulets. Now, this nerf is you grant 1% to all elemental resistance and pen per 15 Omni. I left out the pen part. So basically, Omniscience is going to be worse now by 33%. So it's like around a 20 to 30% damage nerf, depending on how much Omni you currently have. Now, this is not going to change anything, because Omni being nerfed like this pretty much means that it will still be the best build, best item in the game for any build that benefits from elemental penetration. So doing this nerf is another blanket nerf to player power across the board that doesn't accomplish the problem they're trying to solve, which is adding more diversity for amulets. Now, this could be solved if they add a new unique in the new Uber bosses that could be potentially game breaking. But as it stands, these are pretty much just flat nerfs to player power that doesn't accomplish anything to increase diversity for items that you will choose. Now, character item balance, this section is pretty big. Brittle has been nerfed from 15% to 6%. Now, this is probably necessary because Brittle is completely busted. Now, this next change here is a change that everyone is mad about, and this is the mana reservation efficiency mastery being removed. So that 15% reservation efficiency you are so happy to have is just completely gone. And they also nerfed the aura effect and life reservation efficiency masteries. So these right here, 15% reservation efficiency mastery is gone, and 20% life reservation efficiency instead of 30%. And now it's 10% increased effect of auras instead of 15%. So these are changes that pretty much affect every single build in the game. I don't think there's a single build that doesn't take at least one reservation mastery. And flash charges gained on hit has been nerfed on flash. It's now 3 charges maximum instead of 7 charges. And this is a huge nerf to Pathfinder, who take like Master Surgeon to get a lot of regen against a lot of little hits. And that's why I say Pathfinder as an Ascendancy has actually been nerfed. So this removal of veiled mod that allows skills to cost no mana or life while focused is a tiny inconvenient nerf to Corrupting Fever builds. There's still a lot of ways around it, so this shouldn't really matter too much. Chainbreaker has been reworked, and it's not really going to do anything to make people use Chainbreaker. And Recoup has now been added to Jewels as a mod, so it might be a lot easier to get Forbidden right off the ground self-cast initially. Now, they do say down here that they might have more changes in the full patch notes before release, but as history has told me, there's usually not that many changes. But they are looking for feedback So it is very important to see what the community has given for feedback and what we can tell GGG to maybe make them change some of these changes they currently have. So the community reception has been very poor, and I think that might even be an understatement of the century saying that. If I go on Reddit right now, and now Reddit might not be the best to say is like representative of the community, but judging by how many players are here and how many comments are negative, I think it's pretty fair to say it's more than just the Reddit doom and gloom people, right? I literally looked at the thread of the Balance Manifesto, which is, I don't even know where it is, but it's right here, 4.5k comments. I think 90% of them were negative or something bad about the game. You can see here, press F to play respect, Necromancer dead, 3.20 manifesto, PoE next league, 99% Sabo, and then there's also some, what's it called? A lot of things that says skills that buff traps and mines should be removed. And there's some meme posts about defensive, and then there's Alkaiser saying the league is dead already. And then there's what happened to GGG actually buffing underused skill. Summarize the manifesto, and I would never understand. And no melee boss what, and it's just a bunch of hatred for GGG. Now, in terms of like universally what's wrong, it's that people hate that GGG nerfed player power universally while not doing anything to bring down meta skills like Lightning Strike and Seismic Trap. And they're also mad that there's no buffs really in the manifesto that allows new archetypes or new builds to be played. So they're also surprised to see that Nightblade was left untouched, and I think I'm personally pretty surprised. And overall, the general consensus is that they're really mad that this is the end result after 6 months of hard work. It kind of feels like a slap in the face, and they don't really understand what is going on in the game to cause the meta to be stale. Because right now, with the changes they've made, the meta is going to be exactly the same. It's going to be Lightning Strike and Seismic Trap at the top early on. And it's even going to be worse because a lot of builds are completely gone. There's no more DD. There's no more EA totems, maybe. There's no more Skelly mages. So a lot of the builds are just removed. So people are pretty much forced into playing Lightning Strike or Seismic Trap if they want to play a meta build. Now, overall, you might want to think about you want to know like what my thoughts are about the manifesto. I think this is a terrible, terrible manifesto. It kills a lot of the hype for 3.19. It puts pretty much all of the pressure on the announcement live stream to introduce game-changing new skills. Without new skills, the meta will probably be as stale as ever. And I do think that removing the base power from minions and moving to gear is a mistake, as it will alienate a large portion of players. People hate having the power move to gear and telling that they have to farm currency to become powerful when they were already powerful to begin with. And I think nerfing orb reservation universally leads to less build creativity. And overall, it feels like we're just playing the 3.17 meta, except the builds are worse. So this is what I posted on my Twitter: 3.17 new builds, 3.18, 3.17 builds, 3.19, 3.17 builds, but nerf. So it really, really feels bad. And the skill buffs should pretty much just be left out. If you're going to nerf or buff skills by 5 to 10% to a skill that's bad mechanically, you should probably just not write it into the patch notes. Because writing it into the patch notes makes it seem like you actually looked at the skill and thought that 5 to 10% was going to make it so that the skill was suddenly played, which is absolutely ludicrous. I actually wrote some quick notes on the manifesto. Pretty much same meta at a lower power level with certain builds removed. Worst build diversity that you'll probably ever see if these changes go through. Defenses will be exactly the same as before. So the defense rework or whatever the problem was with defense is completely unchanged. Dumb explanation regarding Necromancer and Minion builds with Saboteur is head and shoulders above every other Ascendancy for traps and mines. And there are just too many problems magically created by GGG with lackluster solutions. And good changes. I mean, some of these are troll. This is not really what I believe in. So nerfing Cast on Death is a good thing. Nerfing War Loop is good. I like the Fortify change for Berserkers, increased duration. Removing DD is probably good in the long run. This is not really true. I should probably delete that. Trickster buffs are going to be good. EA Totem nerf I think is good just because it's a bad playstyle. Oh yeah, they also buffed haste, which is pretty big, and this should be a pretty good change for aura stackers. I do like the Juggernaut Ascendancy change for the mini Transcendence. Bad changes are the universal nerf to spell suppression on gear, because this leads to less diversity in gearing options, especially for people on the left side of the tree. Divine Blessing, I do think, was a good thing because of skill expression, and it allows for a lot more build options. Reservation Efficiency Mastery nerf is terrible. Omni nerf, I think, is just bad. It's just nerfing player power and doesn't accomplish the goal of allowing other options to exist. The routine balance pass, I've said, is laughably bad. They forgot to nerf Seismic correctly. I don't know if they actually have more changes for Seismic in the patch notes, but as it stands, Seismic is the best skill in the game. And I don't think the melding change is enough. And I think Aegis and melding combo will still plague the meta and will still be the best defensive option, as Aegis was pretty much left untouched. And this is a quick sneak peek at my tier list, so I don't know if you caught it. But thanks for watching, everyone. I do think that the patch notes and the announcement live stream will save everything, and it's not really copium. It's going to be the truth. Otherwise, the meta is going to be terrible. But we'll see what happens on August 11th. So this is a great way for GGG to build hype for the announcement live stream, because everyone is going to be looking at the live stream now to look for all of the new skills and the new balance changes and the new reworks that will save PoE, right? So great marketing tactic by GGG to build hype for the live stream. But thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you find more Mirrors, Exalts, and Mage Plus than me, and see ya next time. Bye!